Thank you very much, Philippe Bagus, for these insights. After we heard everything that goes wrong in the Eurozone, Gerd Habermann will tell us why Switzerland is doing so well, although it probably also faces some challenges of its own. Mr. Habermann is a professor of economic and social sciences at the University of Potsdam. He was until recently and for many years the director of the Entrepreneurs Institute of the Family Business Federation in Germany, to which he is still associated. Professor Habermann is the co-founder and managing director of the Friedrich Hayek Foundation for a Free Society, named after the 1974 Nobel Prize laureate, and the associated Friedrich Hayek Society, where I'm happy to be also a member. Professor Habermann is a widely published philosopher and historian of ideas and the author and editor of numerous books on liberty, the welfare state, and the great thinkers. He studied social and economic history, political science, philosophy, and economics at the universities of Frankfurt, Vienna, Tübingen, and Constance, where he graduated with a thesis on bureaucracy. This probably explains his lack of sympathy for it. Last but not least, he is a longtime friend and an astute observer of Switzerland, Professor Habermann.
Ladies and gentlemen, vielen Dank. Ich habe das Privileg,
Ladies and gentlemen,
mein Deutsch ist wesentlich besser.
hello. So I have the privilege to speak English, so my German is much better than English. So I have the privilege to speak in my own language. So you have received one single slide about the alternatives that may exist in Europe. So I would like to highlight the scenario that exists in Switzerland. In Switzerland, there are not only pros but also cons. So, of course, we have disadvantages in Switzerland. We also have sometimes some social unrest. So we are considered as a safe haven. So we are considered as a paradise. But we also have some disadvantages, I would say. We also have some political problems in Switzerland, if I have to take a critical standpoint. However, I am an observer of Switzerland, and I think that there are structural advantages, and that's the reason why I am optimistic vis-à-vis Switzerland. So the Swiss are not aware of the advantages they have and they enjoy. They are very critical vis-à-vis the country. They maintain, for instance, that they have so many advantages around them that they are not aware of the advantages. If you're married and if you have been married for 20 years or 25 years, you no longer perceive the advantages deriving from marriage. This is clear. So all the advantages deriving from marriages are invisible. And this is the reason for a lot of criticism from Swiss vis-à-vis Switzerland. So, as a German, I see Switzerland that Switzerland has many liberal advantages. So, the liberalism has remained intact in Switzerland. So, it's in Switzerland we have much more liberalism than in other European countries. There is still a feeling of property in Switzerland. There is a citizenship in terms of rights for citizens, and they do believe in productivity and competitiveness, thanks to versatility and to a multifold production. So self-responsibility, self-production, autonomy are very important in Switzerland and for the Swiss government. Last but not least, in Switzerland, we are still unease vis-à-vis the small size of the country. So the idea of a small-sized country is still a reason for unease, and this is a criticism or an idea that has been going on for a long time. So it is considered as a shame to be such a small-sized country. So individuals are isolated and cannot attain higher advantages or higher goals. So the economy is a secondary goal in such a small-sized country. So, as we have a lot of people here in the audience coming from Switzerland, and I think you all share that this is false, this is a wrong opinion. So there are no disadvantages in being a small-sized country. Sorry, let's... close the presentation. All right. So Switzerland has a competitive edge, but not only from an economic viewpoint. First of all, Switzerland falsifies the economies of scale from a political perspective. So the economy is relatively successful vis-à-vis the size of its competitors. It creates and it ranks among the top countries in the world from an economic viewpoint. It is one of the leading countries in terms of economics, and the quality of scientists, of entrepreneurs, of artists and poets is outstanding. And Nobel Prize laureates are many in Switzerland, considering the size of the country. So we have an old liberal country, and the small size of Switzerland allowed the country to increase and capitalize on the intellectual property and to capitalize on the great advantages that are in Switzerland. As you see, there are other small countries like Singapore or Hong Kong that bloomed and that enjoy very high levels of social qualities and welfare state. So these countries rank among the top countries both in terms of economics and in terms of culture. It is not by chance that Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a Swiss, and he devised a theory considering the political power of Switzerland, and many other philosophers, historians agreed with him. So we have a small country that in proportion is much greater and much more competitive than other countries in the world. And so the administration is much more difficult to materialize if distances are longer. Distances have to be paid. So that's the reason why the administration in Switzerland is so effective. Distances are short. You don't have to pay. You have no difficulties, no great bureaucracy, and the political scenario and the political arena is also streamlined thanks to the small size of the country. The laws and regulations are harmonized. So we have laws and regulations specifically for each provinces and for each canton in Switzerland. Hence, we can avoid social unrest and social problems. Last but not least, the administration is independent from the entrepreneurs and from other powers of the economy. So the authority of the administration could be preserved in Switzerland thanks to its autonomy and independence. This is a typical example of decentralization in a small-sized country. So two-thirds
Kleinstaat definieren als unter 10 Millionen Einwohner, 2/3 der UNO-Mitgliedstaaten haben weniger als 10 Millionen.
Two-thirds of the UN countries have to be considered as small countries, as they have less than 10 million inhabitants. So 37 countries have less than 1 million inhabitants. There are also micro-countries. So Switzerland can be considered as a middle-sized country and not as a small-sized or micro-country. If we also consider the exports in terms of goods and services. So in terms of exports, it can be considered as a medium-sized power. As a German, I can also appreciate another advantage, so the real democracy that reigns in Switzerland. So in the Middle Ages, Switzerland had typical structure. That is, there has been no absolutism in Switzerland, and there has never been absolutism in Switzerland, as it was the case in many other countries. So they had a real democracy, and they have been having a real democracy for many years.
Die Schweiz ist niemals und ist bis heute kein Beamtenstaat nach Art Deutschlands. Auch ein ganz, ganz wichtiger Unterschied für den Geist Ihres Landes oder Frankreichs oder Russlands. Nirgends in der Welt haben Bürger so viel zu sagen
in Switzerland, citizens have a voice and they have the right to participate in the decision-making process. They can take part in referendums in Germany. Referendums and co-decision-making has almost become a taboo. Of course, we do have referendums, but we do not enjoy the same level of democracy as we have in Switzerland. So democracy is not only theory but also practice. So citizens are active part of the political situation in Switzerland. So as I said, the citizenship has a power to take part in the decision-making process of the country. They can take part in the economic and political processes in Switzerland. So in Switzerland, we have a unique situation in terms of a co-decision-making process. So an average citizen in Switzerland is much more prepared and has a much more has a much opener horizon than any other citizens in Europe. I must say the average Swiss elector is much more informed about the political situation in Switzerland than it is in Germany or in other countries in Europe. If we consider the European political arena, and if we consider the talk shows that you can watch on TV, you immediately perceive the difference. In Germany, you have big emotions, a lot of words, a lot of emotions and feelings, but you do not perceive the same preparation that people have in Switzerland. So we do have emotions, but we don't have any practical preparation. Switzerland is a cooperative in a certain sense. So it is a cooperative in terms of decision-making and political process. As a consequence, they are able to govern themselves. They have a milice system. So it's true, there are some professional politicians that are active in Switzerland, but not only professionals. There is, of course, a political caste that is present in Switzerland, but many politicians are not professional politicians. There are many people in Switzerland that are able to take part in political parties, and they co-fund the political parties, and this could be impossible in other countries. So they, and this is a great difference between Switzerland and Germany, for instance. So they are very much prepared, and some people say that this is not true, but this is actually the reality. In Switzerland, you can administer yourself, but there is also a self-government, and not only a self-administration. In Germany, the local administration is an executive administration. There is a decentralization of the state functions, and this is true, but it's not a real self-government, let's say, and citizens also perceive that this is not a true self-government, as it is the case in Switzerland. The political parties in Switzerland, for instance, are active, but they are also active, especially at a canton level, and they are very powerful at a canton level. So this is a true decentralization. So let's come now to the nitty-gritty. So it's a true decentralization. We can say that this decentralization has a great advantage. So there is a competition between among the different municipalities and vis-à-vis the sovereign state, among the different cantons, and vis-à-vis the confederation. So these different state levels are like units that represent their citizens, as it is the case on the market, for instance. So if you are not satisfied with a canton, you can go and you can go to another canton. So this has a great advantage. So there's a great competition among the different cantons, and this brings to a greater efficiency of the government. And in Germany, this is not so efficient. So in Switzerland, we can say we have real true self-government, and you know, the internal, the domestic market in Switzerland is not yet a reality. We can say that from an economic viewpoint, we have a very strong canton-based economy. So we can also say that transaction costs and company efficiency are also greater, and this also increases the efficiency of the country as a whole. So in Switzerland, this competition and this identification with smaller entities may bring about some costs, but in the long term, the efficiency of such a decentralized political system is going to be bigger. Subsidiarity is not only theory. What is a subsidiarity? It's a great word. That is, if you are ready to provide some help, you do provide help. This is the concept of subsidiarity, and this is what you do normally in a family, and this is what you can also do within the borders of your state.
Ein wunderbarer Vorteil für die Schweiz ist auch die Tatsache, dass sie nun schon seit einigen Jahrhunderten den Status der Neutralität hat. Das ist nicht nur ökonomisch ganz günstig, indem sich hier sehr viele internationale Organisationen angesiedelt haben, sondern damit ergibt sich auch für die Schweiz eine Rolle international, die andere Staaten nicht spielen können.
Unlike many other countries, and this is because many international organizations are based in Switzerland.
Erzeugt eine intensive Intensität des politischen Lebens, eine
So the
Sachgemäßheit der
political life in
Entscheidungen, wenn auch
Switzerland
nicht
is
jeder
much
Entscheidung.
vivid, is
Ich meine,
much more
ich habe auch
vivid
manchmal
than
den
in
Eindruck,
other
dass der
countries
Schweizer
due
Stimmbürger nicht
to
vernünftig
this decentralized political
urteilt,
scenario.
nämlich dann, wenn er
And
immer für
this
mehr
is
Wohlfahrtsstaat
a
abstimmt und gegen
great
Privatisierung ist
advantage,
oder
for
gegen eine
instance, to
Liberalisierung des
obtain
Arbeitsrechts.
some advantages in
Direktdemokratie
terms of
garantiert noch nicht
better
vernünftige Entscheidungen, denke
welfare
ich.
state
Aber
and
sie macht sie wenigstens
advantages
möglich.
at a local level.
Der Wettbewerb als
So the
Entdeckungsverfahren spielt hier in der Schweiz
in
wirklich eine große Rolle.
Switzerland
Sie sind ja ein
plays a very
Laboratorium von
important role. It's a
Konstitutionen,
sort of
von
laboratory
Achten des politischen Zusammenlebens und
constitution,
des
of
Ausgleichs
political
und
cohesion,
als
of political
sozusagen
balance.
eine Stätte für die
And
Welt, wo
so it's a
die
kind
einmal
of
studieren kann,
place
was es
of
heißt, wenn man nicht
place of a
zentralisiert, sondern
worldwide
wenn man die
place
Macht
where you
nach
can
unten
study, you
gibt.
can work, and you can
Auch
have an international
die kleineren
horizon.
Einheiten insgesamt geben
So
den
the
großen Vorteil
smaller
größerer Flexibilität.
unions,
Sie können sich
unity,
schneller
and the
anpassen,
smaller unity
wie auch bei mittelständischen Unternehmen das ja
allows
besser
the
ist
smaller
als in einem
entities allowed
Großkonzern.
to
Kleine
adapt
untergliederte
much
Staaten können sich
quicker
sehr schön
to
besser
any
anpassen
changes into the
und haben eine
circumstances.
Flexibilität in
So
Krisen, die
flexibility and
Großstaaten,
versatility
die
is
eben
much higher
starr
in
und
Switzerland
schwer beweglich
than in
sind,
bigger
nicht
states
haben.
where rigidity and stiffness
Und selbst
are
gegen große
keywords.
Imperien sind ja kleine
So
konföderierte
they
Staaten häufig
are
die
a
stärkeren
small
gewesen, wenn sie an den Bund der
confederation,
griechischen
so they
kleinen
have
Poleis ungefähr, die
much
waren
more
ja im Durchschnitt nicht
power
größer als
vis-à-vis the
Appenzell,
superpowers of the world.
Innerrhoden
It
oder,
was like
oder
in the ancient
Außerrhoden,
Greece where the
und haben
polis
trotzdem
was very
gemeinsam
powerful.
zusammen dann
So
das
despite
persische
the small
Großreich
size,
besiegt.
the
Allerdings
polis
muss
was
ich
able
zugeben,
to conquer
dass das nicht garantiert
persons
ist und
and to
der einzige
conquer
Nachteil,
many
den die
other
Schweiz wirklich
countries
hat,
in Europe. The greatest
ist,
disadvantage,
dass sie
disadvantage
Erpressung
of
gegenüber der
Switzerland
großen
is that, in my
herumwohnenden
opinion,
Großstaaten, ja, da ist sie verletzbar.
Its fragility
Und wird gelegentlich zum
it
Überleben
is
wie im letzten Krieg.
fragile,
Und
and
heute mit der
so
nachvollziehenden Gesetzgebung sozusagen, der
considering
Europagesetzgebung,
the European
sie muss dafür
legislation,
leider einen Preis zahlen.
Switzerland had to pay a
Der größte
price
Schutz der
for the new
Schweiz
EU
liegt
regulations.
derzeit darin,
Switzerland
dass sie
is
die
protected
zentralen
for the
Pässe
time being.
verwaltet, zentrale Alpenpässe, und sich dadurch ein gewisses Machtpotenzial verschafft.
Well, the advantage
Und
that
in dem
Switzerland
Gleichgewichtsdenken
has
der
nowadays
konkurrierenden
are the Alps that
Das war
protect
bisher auch
the
unbedingt notwendig, um
country
die
from
Unabhängigkeit
the
der Schweiz zu
superpowers.
sichern und natürlich
And
auch ein
so
Eigeninteresse
Switzerland has become
der
and
Großstaaten
is
herum
still
daran,
much
dass die Schweiz erhalten
independent
bleibt
from
als
other
Beispiel,
countries.
wo man dann eben
However,
Geschäfte
it is
machen kann,
cannot
Verhandlungen
be fully
führen kann, weil man
protected
die
from the surrounding countries and from the EU
unabhängigen Dritten hat.
regulations and
Die
legislation.
Schweiz ist auch immer ein Zeichen
Switzerland
des
is
Erfolgs
has
ihres
always
Modells,
been
ein Anziehungspunkt für
successful
unabhängige Leute, unabhängige Denker, ein
recipe for
Fluchtpunkt für Intelligenz und
independent
für
people, smart
Kapital
people,
gewesen.
capital,
Gerade interessante Leute wandern ja auch gegenwärtig wieder in die Schweiz
and
aus,
this
aus
is
Deutschland zum
particularly
Beispiel.
relevant
Viele
if you see that
hochqualifizierte
from a
Ärzte,
German
Professoren
perspective.
findet man
Many
hier in der
doctors and
Schweiz
many
wieder.
experts have moved
Das
to
ist ein Zeichen für
Switzerland,
ihre
and this is a sign that testifies the excellence of Switzerland in terms of economics and science. In the 19th century, Switzerland was a shelter for scientists, experts, and philosophers. Let's think of Voltaire, Rousseau. And in the 19th century, many liberal and democratic Germans could find a shelter in Switzerland. Unfortunately, Lenin too, as you all know.
Auf diese Weise hat die
So, Switzerland
dann einen
has
Zuzug an Kraft und an Intelligenz, der ihr
acquired
natürlich sehr
many
zugutekommt und ihr einen
smart
weiteren
people,
Wettbewerbsvorteil
many
gibt.
forces and many powers,
Die
and
Schweiz,
this
sagte ich
is
schon, sie hat
an
auch keine
ingredient for
cäsaristischen
its
Exzesse bisher
success
durchmachen müssen und vor allem damit auch
in
keine
a
großen
European but also
Kriegskatastrophen wie
international
Deutschland, die
setting.
eine furchtbare Wirkung auf das Identitätsgefühl der Deutschen hatten.
However,
Und vor allen Dingen, sie hatten auch
Switzerland
nie
could
hier
retain
eine echte
its
Inflation,
own
wie wir sie
identity.
zweimal
Switzerland
im letzten
has
Jahrhundert in
never
Deutschland
had
mit der unglaublichen
such an
nivellierenden
inflation as we
Wirkung,
had in
mit der
Germany
Folge, dass
or in other
das
European
Selbstbewusstsein des
countries.
Bürgertums
So
stark
the
angebrochen wurde, weil eben die
identity
eigenen
of the
Vorsorge
Germans
durch die
was
Staatspolitik vernichtet
deeply
wurde
influenced
und man dann
by
selber
the
eben zum
events that took
Sozialhilfefall
place in
wurde
Europe
und
throughout
nur die
the last century.
Sozialversicherung
Switzerland,
schien einen Schutz
however,
gegen
could retain its own
inflationäre
identity,
Vernichtung der
and the Swiss are
Eigenvorsorge zu
still
bieten.
very proud of their identity.
In der Schweiz ist auch die
Switzerland,
Umverteilung noch nicht zum Gesellschaftsspiel geworden, wie in Deutschland wenigstens noch nicht in dem Maße. Es gibt ja Initiativen,
has not
die Steuer
taken
senken,
place as it was the
ja
case
sogar
in
abschaffen,
Germany.
was man sich in Deutschland nur schwer vorstellen kann.
In Switzerland,
was
the
mich
debate is
besonders
about
anzieht, ist auch, dass
eliminating
Sie,
the
dass
taxes and not
in
only
der Schweiz der
reducing them. And this
sozialpolitische
would be
Interventionismus
unthinkable
verglichen, wie
in
gesagt, mit
countries like
Deutschland. Ich weiß, relativ ist das bei
Germany, for
Ihnen auch
instance.
inzwischen nicht mehr vom
So,
Besten,
I know
dass der
that
sozialpolitische Interventionismus
the
nicht die Ausmaße hat wie in Deutschland.
social
Ich finde es eine
policy
Heldentat der Schweiz,
and the welfare state
dass sie
are
in
also
etlichen
key
Volksabstimmungen die
concepts
Einführung der
that are
AHV
very well
abgelehnt hat.
preserved compared to
Und erst in
Germany.
Folge der besonderen Umstände im und nach dem Zweiten
considering
Weltkrieg dann
the,
auch das Volk schließlich bedrängt von der Exekutive der AHV und dann 20 Jahre später der zentralen Arbeitslosenversicherung zugestimmt hat. Dass sie jetzt noch ein Familienartikel ablehnt, ja, wenn auch leider nur mit Stände mehr, aber egal, es ist abgelehnt, ist abgelehnt. Das fand ich schon wieder sehr erfreulich. Ja, aus all dem schließe ich, dass die Schweiz
Before I conclude, I would
daran
just like
täte, ihre Vorzüge eher
to
noch zu steigern als zu
describe
vermindern.
the skills
Denn
of the
ihr
flexibility
komparativer
of
Vorteil ist zugleich
Switzerland,
ihr
which
größtmöglicher
have
Nutzen für
allowed
andere.
to increase its
Und der
competitive
schlimmsten
edge
Fehler,
vis-à-vis
den Sie
other
machen könnten, und ein
countries.
Fehler, der direkt in die Zerstörung ihrer Strukturen und ihrer
This has to do
Wettbewerbsvorteile
with its open structure,
führte, wäre
with
der
all the
Beitritt zum
advantages
Imperium
that this country
Europäische
can
Union.
offer,
Sie
not
hat
only to the country itself, but also
historischer
to the other member countries
Kleinstaat
in
mit
the
einem so
European
ausgeprägten
Union.
politischen Profil
It has a
mehr zu
well-defined
verlieren
political
als Staaten wie zum Beispiel
profile.
Luxemburg,
If you
Belgien
compare
oder die
it with the
Slowakei.
Luxembourg or the
Und vor allen
Slovak
Dingen, sie kann auch
Republic,
über den europäischen Block,
if you think
ist sie mit dem freien Welthandelssystem verbunden. Sie hat
there
noch die
is a
Möglichkeit,
certain relationship between
sich
Switzerland and the so-called
Brüsseler
European
Nivellierungs-
bloc,
und
and this
Harmonisierungsmaschinerie
has promoted
entziehen.
harmony,
Sie
balance,
kann auch noch eine
and
selbstständige Zinspolitik treiben.
also education policy and many
ein
other
Beitritt
areas
zur
have
EU würde
benefited
bedeuten, dass sie in
from
den Sog gezogen
that.
wurden,
So
der am Ende
this
deren Gesetzlichkeit
has had a
eben,
long-term
dargestellt wurde.
benefit.
Besser ein Selbstbestimmungsrecht der
several
Schweizer und
areas.
selbst besser auch ein nachvollziehender
I think
Angleichung an gewisse
has allowed us
EU-Regeln
to adjust to many of the best
Mitbestimmungsrecht in Brüssel, das immer sehr prekär
regulations
wäre. Denn was würde die Schweiz
to reduce
dann darstellen,
precarity,
namlich bei
most
einer
of all in these
demokratisierten
challenging
Europäischen
times,
Union.
and has enabled the Swiss state to
Ich
foster
denke, die Schweiz hat keinen
democracy
Grund,
and the
ihren
fight
Ursprung als
against
lockerer Staatenbund zu
precarity.
vergessen, der einmal zu dem
think
einzigen Zweck geschlossen war, die
we are
Autonomie der
very, in
beteiligten Städte und freien
Switzerland, people are very
Bauergenossenschaften
much
zu erhalten.
driven by this
Die
tangible
Rougemont,
goals.
den ich sehr schätze,
Let's
geschrieben
just
hat, sie verbündeten sich miteinander, um voneinander verschieden zu bleiben.
Relationship,
Der
the
Grund ihrer
capability
Solidarität
of
war nicht die
entertaining
kollektive Macht,
relationship,
sondern die Autonomie jedes
imprinted at
Einzelnen.
solidarity, preserving its own
Die
identity.
Schweiz,
This is another
Herbert
striking
Lüthi hat einmal
feature
diese Schweiz
of
als Antithese
Switzerland.
vorgestellt. Eine Antithese zum
They have
Denken in
developed a
Kollektiven,
sort
in
of
Konzentration der Macht,
antithesis
Monokultur und Gleichschaltung.
against
Die
single
Schweiz sollte
culture,
diese
single
Antithese
power,
bleiben, auch wenn
in
diese Rolle
favor
sie
of an
betriebswirtschaftlich etwas kostet,
open-minded
ja selbst
culture,
wenn diese
a
Position
very
den persönlichen
pragmatic
Komfort des Schweizer Bürgers
approach.
beeinträchtigen würde.
Despite all the
Aber in
conservative
Wirklichkeit
aspects,
ist
all
das
the
Schweizer Modell
conservative
ja auch eine
traits,
Wohlstandsformel.
this is definitely a
Besser
very
darum, und damit komme ich zum
well-working
Schluss,
formula.
eine Schweizer Antithese auf Dauer als eine
There is
europäische
therefore a
Synthese,
Swiss
welche die Schweiz als
antithesis, which can be
prägnante und
perceived
sympathische
as being opposite to the
Kollektivindividualität
collective
weitgehend
European
auslöschen würde.
thesis.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much for listening.